Hello and welcome to Take Six. I am streaming executive producer Thomas Mates. Happy New Year to all of you. I'm filling in today for Julie Broughton. She'll be in this evening filling in for New 6 meteorologist Jonathan Kegis, so you'll see her starting at 4 tonight, and then she will join us again back here on Take Six starting tomorrow. We've got a great show for you for the first start of the new year. We are going to be talking with New 6 digital meteorologist David Nazario coming up in a few minutes. There's been some rumors going around that we could see some snow possibly in Florida, but he's here to tell you those are a little overblown to say the least. That'll be coming up in just a few minutes. First, though, unfortunately, we must talk about the act of terrorism that took place in New Orleans on New Year's Day. Today, the FBI, along with local officials in Louisiana, held a news conference giving an update on the situation there. The biggest development that came out of that is they are now saying that the attacker acted alone. But they are still following up on tips. They've received more than 400 tips from across the country following the attacks. They're still following up on that, and the investigation continues. But again, they are saying that the attacker acted alone, and at this point, there is no definitive link between that attack and the situation that unfolded in Las Vegas yesterday as well, where the Cybertruck blew up outside of the Trump property there. But in any case, today, in New Orleans, the Bourbon Street will be reopening, and the Sugar Bowl will be taking an event, and there will be heightened security at both locations, as would be expected. To talk to us a little bit more about that situation and how it's going to be developing, we're joined now by our law enforcement and safety expert, Stephen Montiero. He joins us right now. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a little off hours for you, but I appreciate your time. We'll try and get you out of here relatively quickly.
Hey, no problem, man. Anytime we get to talk about some stuff, it's always a good time.
Exactly. I appreciate that. So, Steve, as I said, let's start with the latest development. I know that they said that today, initially they were suspecting that there may be accomplices involved in this attack. Now they're saying that this was a lone wolf attack. How does that change the perspective of law enforcement as they're going forward with these events today?
Well, the biggest thing to take away from what we are hearing and what we're kind of dissecting through the news is, yes, they're going to provide information to us, but they're not necessarily going to give us details on what's going to change throughout the day and how to handle that kind of surrounding event security. It's not going to change whether there are accomplices or if this was a lone actor, simply because of the copycats and stuff like that. This is obviously they're looking into terrorism with this, so there's an ideology behind this attack. So what you are going to see is probably an overwhelming amount of presence of law enforcement, more than what they would already treat. Because you think about it, these Super Bowl games and the Sugar Bowls, you already see high level of security at these events of what we're not normally seeing on a day-to-day at an event. This will be rather large.
Yeah, and Steve, I think that's an important thing to say is that, even though there is potentially no apparent risk out there by the dint of there not being accomplices, you could see other people inspired by this. And that is something that law enforcement is bracing for and preparing for. And I'm sure not just in New Orleans, but across the country.
Yeah, you're going to see probably more control over pedestrian traffic when it comes to closer portions, because when we go towards arenas or stadiums, there's always multi-level perimeters, and then people kind of roam. I can probably guess will be highly ticketed at different levels, so they're going to be checking people through phase 1, phase 2. They'll probably be more difficult to park at the events than it was previously. More positive concrete median barriers and stuff like traffic barriers, school buses, large dump trucks. So Thomas, I went through several years of what we call PPD training. It's personal presidential protection type training. And it's only times that you see high level things where we use a dump truck to block a road. And that is to put a barrier, so not even a pickup truck would be able to push that out of the way. You will probably see stuff like this going forward, unfortunately, within the New Orleans area, if not throughout the country.
So let's focus a little bit down on the Sugar Bowl that's happening. That's like the largest event that's happening in New Orleans after this attack. Just looking at this video here, it is a massive structure. Thousands and thousands of people will be there. I imagine that under the best of conditions, this is probably a difficult thing to secure, and now there's going to be even extra scrutiny and extra security involved at the Superdome. Can you walk us through just a little bit sort of what people might expect to see as they're heading into the event, and perhaps even what they might not see but is working to protect them?
So the biggest way I could categorize this, there's probably a likely opportunity where if someone's visiting this, the visualness of security could make someone uncomfortable. And let me explain what I mean by that. Is let's talk post 9/11. You go to the airport, all right, you're in and out. Now in today's world, you could walk around the airport and see a police officer in uniform with a long gun just walking around. That is something that you probably will likely see just as visual deterrent at this Caesars Superdome. Uh, you'll probably have more tactical units visual. You'll probably see more canine units and stuff like that. Drone footage, drone coverage. And that segues into the things you won't see. There, when I tell you, and there's not a lot of stuff I could just put out there here because it's still law enforcement sensitive and I'm still a law enforcement officer, but there is technology that is capable of being present to where we can see firearms before it's even up on that zone. We've talked about stuff like that in the city of Orlando. This will have federal assistance that we probably normally would not see at a game like this. So people just need to understand that the presence will be there. It could be uncomfortable, but the goal is not to have another incident.
Absolutely. And, one thing you had mentioned there is that this is going to have federal support. They have stressed in all of their press conferences that there is close-knit teamwork between all agencies involved. We saw the FBI and the ATF there today. Can you talk to a little bit about the interaction between federal agencies and state and local in these sorts of situations?
I could speak to here in Central Florida, and I know
Certainly.
it's not the relationships don't always work as great in other places, but here in Central Florida, from the state level, we had such a great relationship, whether it's a municipality or if it was Homeland Security coming in. And what will happen is they'll have these meetings leading up to where there'll be point of contacts, there'll be communication lines determined on how it's going to rise up and how it's going to rise down. Who's responsible for what areas and who's responsible really for what type of situations? Because, just because the federal government's helping, that doesn't mean that they can actually do enforcement in certain areas. So there is a clear set guidelines, and I can guarantee because of what happened on New Year's Day in New Orleans, this will be very clear. We're not going to have the drama that we have been hearing about, like similar to the assassination attempt on President-elect, where people have said local and Fed had trouble. I can promise you that every dot, every I will be dotted, every T will be crossed leading up to this simply because of why we're doing this.
Okay, understandable. And just one last question before I let you go. The one thing that the governor and the mayor of New Orleans stressed is that that the city is now safe. That it is probably more secure than it was before New Year's Eve. And they are, what struck me as a little surprising, and maybe others as well, was that they are intending on reopening Bourbon Street before the game begins today. Just from the law enforcement perspective, does that seem a little sudden for you, a little quick after such an event, or does that seem like it's perhaps in the best interest of the city to try and get life back to normal as quickly as possible?
For someone that's not there, but I've been involved in situations like this, if they are saying that they are willing to open it back up, it's because they have confidence that they can secure that area. I don't know any law enforcement leader that would take any chance after a situation like this simply just because it could make an economic impact to open it back up. If they're choosing to open this up, it's because they are prepared for it. They are probably going to have a completely different security operational plan. But if they are opening it up, I would, lean to the side that they are confident that they can secure it and not have anything happen. Now, Thomas, I would also lean to the mentality side behind this.
Hmm.
We as a society, this is why things happen like this, is because they try to stop the way that we live. And yeah, you can take security measures, but we can't just stop living the way that we do.
Hmm.
So I'm glad to see local law enforcement probably going to step it up dramatically in that area. And I can guarantee there'll probably be some positive barriers in that area to stop all traffic.
Gotcha. And the one thing I know that you always stress, and perhaps it's a good idea for us to say this just, today as everyone is going about their business and probably have a heightened awareness of what's going on around them. I know you always say you ultimately are the one who is responsible for your own safety and security. If you could just, give us some of that I know you preach to all of us here at the station all the time, whenever, as our reporters go out into, we'll say, difficult situations out in their course of
Right.
their job. Just, what should people be aware of as they're going about, and as, some people may be, a little more heightened awareness of their own personal safety.
At the end of the day, Thomas, I'm so glad that you listened to me, brother. Uh, we are responsible for our own safety. We cannot keep a cop in our pocket all the time and deploy it whenever we feel uncomfortable. And we are built unlike any other species on the planet. If some with you, I'm back.
Yep, I
There
got
we
you.
go. All right. If something does not feel right, it's because it is not right. Have just an understanding of your surroundings. And if something makes you feel uncomfortable, remove yourself from that area. Know where your exits are. Never, ever panic when something occurs. And I know I say this a lot too, but take that pause before you react when the crowd starts moving. And I'll leave it at that, Thomas. I think at the end of the day, if people go into an environment where there's a lot of people, have your safety in mind, be calm about it. And if something doesn't feel right, it's okay to remove yourself from that event.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your expertise, Steve. We really appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Have a great day.
See you, man.
All right. And with that, we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll be talking with News 6 digital meteorologist David Nazario. Again, it's chilly out today. It's going to be chilly for a few days, but just how winter-like could it get here in Central Florida? David will break it all down for you. That'll be coming up in about 2 minutes. Welcome back to Take Six. You're taking a live look now at Daytona Beach. It's a beautiful shot out there at the beach, but it is a bit of a chilly day, at least a Florida chilly day. I am streaming executive producer Thomas Mates, filling in for Julie Broughton. She'll be joining us this afternoon, starting on News 6 at 4, filling in for Jonathan Kegas this evening. But as I said, it's a little chilly out there today, at least by Florida standards. It's going to be even potentially a little colder, especially in the mornings over the next couple of days. But some people have let their imaginations, let's say, run away with themselves a little bit, at least according to our meteorologists. And to tell us a little bit more about the sort of runaway thoughts about what the weather could hold for us, we are joined now by digital meteorologist David Nazario. David, how are you doing today?
Great, Thomas. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I know this morning you always get a rundown on the weather, and in our morning editorial meetings, you and Candace were there, and you started out by saying some people are going to be a little embarrassed in the coming days. Can you explain to us why exactly that is?
I can absolutely explain. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little tired of seeing it at this point, but anytime, especially if you're watching out there and you have an Instagram, a TikTok, a YouTube, something on the social media department, there has been talk of teens in Central Florida, possible snow. I've seen folks advertising snowfall for the likes of Tampa Bay, the attractions here in Central Florida, and that's just like you said, runaway imagination. I can't, that's when you can weed out the folks who are popping open models and trying to get their clicks up versus folks who've actually studied the science of meteorology. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. I'm going to walk you through what's going on out there right now and the buildup as to why there's even people out there in some fairly sizable accounts out there. We'll call them influencers in the weather niche, advertising this hellacious onslaught of Arctic weather for Central Florida. Here's a look outside right now, looking at our water vapor satellite. The reason I have the water vapor up is so you can really kind of get a feel for each individual layer of the atmosphere. I love to use the water vapor to highlight what's going on down close to where we are at ground level versus all the way up towards the top of where weather is observed in our atmosphere. And you can see we have one front. That's going to be the name of the game, as a matter of fact, folks. We have one front that's moving through the Bahamas now. That's why it is a little chillier out here currently. This came through our area just in time for the new year, around midnight as the ball was dropping. New Year's Eve into New Year's Day. And then towards the upper left-hand corner, behind where it says water, under the banner, you can see another front coming down. And that one's going to pack just a little bit more of a punch and help to take our temperatures down that much more as we go through the next 7 days. So moving right along, let's go ahead and take a look at the radar imagery real quick. The radar is clear. And I know what jumps out at you right away is probably what's going on up near Gainesville, Ocala, and the Villages. Yes, we do have a frost freeze advisory out that is going to come into effect tonight as that next frontal system slowly but surely gets closer and that cold air can continue to seep into our neighborhood. That's exactly why National Weather Service, for our northern viewers up there, have already started to look at the potential for some frost and freezing. Here's a wonderful graphic showing you that. The lows for tonight up there near Gainesville, Ocala, dropping close to freezing, 34 in Gainesville, 35 in Ocala, but then you can see the rest of us are still going to be pretty cold, sticking around the low to mid 40s. And of course, naturally, if you live in Brevard County, we're going to stay a little bit more on the mild side, trying to sneak below that 50-degree threshold. But because of the warm waters off the coastline, more than likely not going to happen, at least as of right now. We'll see. And it's definitely going to continue to get colder and colder as we go through time. Here's a quick glance at that frost advisory. You can see it is valid for 4 to 8 a.m. as we move through time. And I'm not too sure why it says Wednesday. This should be auto updating. This is going to be as we go through tomorrow morning, and then we could revisit this again on Sunday morning as we start the day this upcoming weekend after that next front is fully through our viewing area. Now, I just want to take you through the fog tracker real quick, getting kind of into the local weather a little bit more before we talk all this weirdo snow stuff that's trending on social media. You can see fog is no longer an issue, and the reason I bring this up is the last few days we've had some dense fog advisories and lots of fog on the roadways, unfortunately possibly contributing to a few of the crashes that myself and especially Trooper Steve has mentioned during our morning shows on New Year's and before and after the fact there. And then finally, last but not least, here's a look at the national temperatures just for your SA, as I'll call it, for your situational awareness. You can see 9 up there in Bismarck, 24 in Sioux Falls. Temperatures slowly begin to increase, but notice the 2 gradients. We have one gradient between us here in Orlando, and we'll even say Panama City, a little bit more of a gradient there. But I'm really looking at Orlando versus Atlanta, almost an 18 to 20 degree difference. And then you can see the other front between Wichita and Kansas, St. Louis, Missouri versus Omaha and Chicago. Again, approaching a 20 degree difference between those areas. And just looking at our surface temps here, you can kind of get a feel for where your next batch of cold air is, identified by the front that we saw over on the water vapor satellite. So now this is what has everybody in a tussle right now. Everybody's going crazy on social media. There's a lot of folks who don't know booty from elbow, I'll say, about weather, and they're getting thousands upon thousands. They're getting their revenue. You know, they're doing their thing. They're getting the clicks, and unfortunately, all y'all out there might be falling for it, and that's why myself and the rest of our wonderful Pinpoint Weather team are trying to dispel any kind of craziness that may be coming across your screens on your social media feeds. This is the latest from Climate Prediction Center, showing our below-average temperatures for the time frame between January 10th and the 16th. And I will say, on top of our models trending back in the warmer direction, this has also shrunk. You can see the coldest anomalies are expected to be up to our north in the mid-Atlantic. Florida is going to be below average, obviously. That's a given at this point with the pattern we have setting up, but not as cold as some of the clickbait out there and as some of the previous model runs you may have looked at on your own time or seen advertised on other stations or, you know, wherever you're getting your info from. Just not as crazy as it has been. This is a look at the highest point in the atmosphere. This is how our upper pattern is going to be changing. You can see as we go through this weekend, it is going to get cold. Should say colder than it already is. As Thomas mentioned at the start of this discussion, it is relatively cold for us native Floridians down here. Then we have that next system that's going to punch its way through the pattern, and we're going to get even chillier as we go through next week. If you look at the time frame at the top there, Tuesday, January 7th, we have just a deep and very broad trough extending through eastern Canada, the Great Lakes, down the eastern seaboard, and that will be influencing our weather here. And then if you look through time, there's your frigid temps, but there's something else that's going on, and I'll zoom in here and I'll show you a little bit. I'll break out our pen tool so I can draw it in. Notice that the coldest temperatures here, the coldest colors, the dark shades of purple, violet, fuchsia, are up to our northeast. Then we have this little guy right there that's trying to punch its way down into the desert southwest, western Texas, and northern Mexico. It's this upper level low that's trying to break away from the rest of the jet stream. The jet's running right in through here as well. I'll go ahead and just doodle it in all funny looking so you get a feel for where the jet stream is. This is trying to break away from that. And as a result, that could very well dork up everybody out there, whether they be a meteorologist or someone just trying to have fun on social media, getting all you to click on their videos, get some notoriety, get that clout, as they say, the youngins say. They might be sadly mistaken, because that could dork up the entire perspective of trying to get as much of that cold air as some had been advertising down into Central Florida. One thing we are going to be watching, though, this is brought to us by the European model, and I'm going to take you through time. And if you watch over the Central Plains, this is going to influence our weather as we go forward. We're looking at another big storm system forming up. Look at that thing. Massive storm system that's going to ramp up as we go through this upcoming weekend towards the tail end of it into early next week. We have about 4 to 5 days before this gets underway. There's your snow, well to the north of Central Florida, but then where I'm looking in particular is going to be that frontal appendage, that leg that's extending from the bottom portion of where you see the snow, and then that pinkish shade indicating the potential for freezing rain. We could be seeing our rain chances going back up, with a threat for some isolated severe weather for our neighbors up in the Panhandle again, as well as further off towards the west and Dixie Alley. So we'll be dialing that in as we go over the next couple of days as well. And then just to kind of alleviate any confusion, we do have our in-house model, the Barron model, pulled up here. And earlier iterations of other models, I'm not going to name them so you don't go hunting for them yourselves or stressing yourself out looking at these things. Let us do that job for you and kind of make everything into a nice bundle. You can see our in-house model really doesn't have much down across the Deep South. It does indeed show that very thick snow band up there for the lower Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the central northern plains, which is where it should be. That's why you never want to go into looking at computer models and trusting them as gospel. My great friend Jonathan Kagas, meteorologist Jonathan Kagas, says it perfectly. Models are not gospel. They're just models. They're the potential of what the atmosphere could look like given certain characteristics come together at that point in time. And in this case, you can see nothing down in the south, nothing down through the Gulf Coast, especially nothing down here in Central Florida. Folks been advertising we have a 6% chance of snow in Central Florida. Do y'all realize that there's still 94% left to make 100? So I don't know. I mean, if that's something that you want to get excited about, feel free to do so. But with that being said, let's rein it in. Let's get ready to close out. These are your forecast lows for tonight. Again, Gainesville, Ocala, Marion County, further to the north from there. Maybe getting into Putnam, Flagler County could get closer and closer to that freezing threshold. And then again, forecast highs for our Friday. Personally, for me, and I bet Thomas, when we bring him back up, would agree with me, this is looking pretty superb just after the holidays. Would I have taken this for New Year's? 110%. But you know what? Getting some chilly weather down here in Florida, clearing out the humidity is always a win in my book, especially being a native Floridian. And then last but certainly not least, here's your 3-day forecast. Rolling through time, you can see we're going to continue to chill out as we go through Friday, Saturday, warming back up with that storm system coming in. See that chance for rain, 20% on Monday. And then the temperatures really begin to drop as we go through next week. Thomas, back to you. That's all I've got, my friend.
All right, excellent. Before I comment on the forecast, and you're right, I am happy to see those cooler temps. I've said this before, David, at least to you personally, you are a wordsmith. And when you said booty to elbow, they don't know the difference between their booty and their elbow, that just cracked me up. I was silently chuckling to myself. So
that is awesome. I love it. I love it. Would have said something else, but
yeah,
it
no,
been
I understand. This is a family show here.
Yep,
but yes,
exactly.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. But yes, the forecast, I am appreciating the cooler temperatures coming in. My wife, when we woke up this morning, she looked at the temperature and she's like, oh my God, it's 45 degrees out. And then she looked at the temperature in we used to live in Portland, Oregon many years ago, and she's like, it's only 42 there, we're practically back. And I'm just like, it's going to stay 42 there, we are going to get much warmer here.
Exactly. Yeah, there's going to be some fluctuating. We got to ride this out a little bit, and then next week we'll drop in and be a little more Portland-esque as those next couple of fronts come through.
Yeah, I know you'll be keeping an eye on it, along with all of our Pinpoint Weather team. Chief Meteorologist Candace Campos will give us the update tomorrow morning, and of course Julie Broughton will be in this evening for more. David, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Of course. Sounds great, Thomas. Have a good one.
You as well. All right, and that will do it for us today here on Take 6. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all had an excellent new year. I hope that the year is off to a great start, 2025. I hope it's your year, truly, for all of us. In any case, we are going to say goodbye for right now, but again, Julie Broughton will be back coming up on News 6 at 4. She will have all your weather, and of course, we will have all of our headlines from the day. And thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope that you have a pleasant day.